All right, welcome everybody to the next episode of the Learnit Podcast. Patti, I'm so delighted to have you joining us today. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I've been looking forward to the conversation.
I love that. All right, well, first question is always the most consistent one. If anyone's watched, they know that this one I don't change because it always tends to be so different for everybody. And it's about your childhood. I've always felt in some ways that when we grow up, our childhood, the experiences that we go through, they in some way shape who we end up becoming or the career that we end up choosing. So would love if you could take us back to your childhood. What was that like? What was it like growing up? How your parents or teachers have described you?
It's a very interesting question. I think that, when I think back to my mom and the way that she would describe me, she would say that I was painfully shy, that I was incredibly quiet and compliant and very much a people pleaser. That if you asked me to do something, I would do it. I would try and do my best every single time.
Yeah.
But although I was engaged and did many different kinds of activities, and I was more of, I would say, a follower than a leader.
And how do you think that has changed today? Do you think that you had to sort of nudge yourself to get out of that, or do you think that's still who you are and you molded your leadership style to fit who you are?
Yeah, I think, and this is something that we've talked about with the leadership team at Montcrest too. I think that I continue to be very much an introvert, that's where I get my energy. But I have needed to work very hard to ensure that I'm also being extroverted in the school community, particularly when it comes to building relationships with families, with children, with teachers. I'm very comfortable with people that I know. I'm less comfortable in novel situations or where there isn't sort of a substantive conversation to be had.
Yeah.
I'm not good at schmoozing.
Yeah. That's fair. And I think that it's a good message too, because a lot of people these days, they associate, their personality, whether they're slightly introverted, as a strength or weakness. But I think that's not how it should be looked at, right? It's more about how do you leverage what your personalities, what your strengths are to shape your own leadership. And you're a great example of how that's been extremely effective, productive, and successful with your own personality. So it's really nice.
Well, thank you for saying that. It's been very successful. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you have a very unique experience journey as well. You've been on two sides of education, two very different sides of education, public space, the independent schools as well. Can you walk us through what you think the biggest differences are between both of those, or what was sort of your experience in both of those facets?
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about it, I think that I've been part of three very distinct sectors within education. So I started in public school, and then I moved to two different university-affiliated schools, and then I moved from there to the true independent school space. And so I've been very fortunate in that journey and in that learning. When I started my career in public school in Wentworth County, which doesn't exist anymore. It was the county that surrounded Hamilton. And I started at a time in education when things were very much in transition. So I believe it was essentially when the province made the decision that curricula would become provincial in nature. It used to be that each school board had their own curriculum. And so in that transition, when I first started, essentially there was no curriculum. It was one of those situations where there was a gap. The new provincial curriculum was in development, but the board was no longer sort of elevating or pushing forward their curriculum. And so I started in grade 2, and I walked into my classroom, my very first classroom, and I had no idea what to teach. No idea. And I think it's the very best possible thing that could have happened to me, because it created a situation where I needed to be responsive to the learners who were in the room, rather than teaching a curriculum document. And I think that one of the greatest challenges that teachers have is they feel such a depth of accountability to the curriculum in a specific expectation way that it becomes a checklist rather than an experience. And so in looking back at that time, I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have begun my career there and had that experience where I just had to make it up.
Yeah.
I had to invent the whole thing. And through my career, that became my disposition, is that I just kept making it up.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. I think that when you have something that's a bit more open-ended, even if it's curriculum-wise, but it's a bit more open-ended, maybe focused on the objective rather than describing exactly what needs to be taught, I think it pushes teachers to try and experiment more, as you know, someone who had been in high school, that was my favorite part, when the teachers tried something different, because then you feel excited, or you feel like something different's happening in class as well. For the teachers today, you know, I feel like there's a lot that vocalize an increased workload for them. There's a lot going on that they need to take care of, but they also want to experiment. They also want to be creative. What advice would you have for people like that are trying to battle the two worlds between satisfying the curriculum but also being an experimenter in their own classrooms?
Mm-hmm. When I left public school and moved to the Institute of Child Study, which is the laboratory school at the University of Toronto, a lot of the research that was happening there was grounded in knowledge building, or as an inquiry approach to learning and teaching.
Right.
And when I was teaching grade 1, I decided to try an experiment. And so essentially I took all of the science and social studies curricula, and I tried to distill from those documents the big ideas. So what was the intent of the curriculum? It was clearly a great curriculum. And very, very thoughtful people had created it. But like, if they were going to say in 3 words what they wanted children to take away from that curriculum, what would they be? And so I came up with what I thought were the 3 big ideas in the curriculum. And then I put the documents away and didn't look at them again until the end of the year. And I worked with the students in my class to dig deeply into those ideas. And because they were conceptual in nature, they were big ideas, they weren't tied to any specific curriculum,
right,
the kids could really bring their interests to that work. And it allowed them to really inquire and to bring themselves into that learning community. And so the way that knowledge building works is that essentially the students in the class sort of make a commitment to understanding something collectively. So rather than each child having responsibility for their own learning, they called it collective cognitive responsibility. So the idea that there's an idea that exists outside all of us, and we're all going to work together to understand that in the very best way that we can. And at the end of the year, after all of the experiences that we shared with the kids, I went back to the curriculum documents. And it was quite clear to me that we had not only achieved what was in the curriculum, but we had far exceeded it.
Wow.
Because you could go as far as the children wanted to go.
Yeah, so many different tangents, right? You weren't restricted in any.
Exactly. And so I would say my advice would be deeply understand the curriculum, and then put the document away.
I love that. Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe that's something people can start experimenting with as well.
Yeah.
And through your whole journey, you know, you've been in different types of roles. I'm a teacher, you know, now principal, a head of school. So I'm curious to know, are there any certain experiences or stories in your career that have truly shaped who you are as a leader today and defined your leadership style?
Mm-hmm. I think that for me, a pivotal experience was the opportunity that I had to go to New York and be a founding faculty member at the school at Columbia University.
Wow.
So Columbia, at that point in time, was committed to attracting and retaining excellent faculty. And at the same time, they worked very closely with the community board that helped them to make decisions about the direction of the school. And so Columbia decided to create an elementary school that was half children of faculty and half children who come from the community that surrounds Columbia University, on lottery needs blind. And so to have the experience of coming together with a group of very passionate educators and creating something that is unlike anything that exists anywhere else was pivotal for me. When you start a school from scratch. And so in our first year, we had grade 1, 2, 3, and 4. You have nothing, right? You have nothing.
Yeah.
And so to be able to work with this group of incredibly creative and passionate people to build from scratch the structure, the philosophy, the processes, the guidelines, the policies, everything was an incredible experience. And I think that in some ways it relates to what we built, but I think more than that, it was about how the school leaders who supported the creation of that school, they had incredibly deep confidence in everybody on the team to be able to contribute. They saw each person as powerful and coming from different places with different experiences and different knowledge, and they really valued and honored each of those perspectives. We worked, it was not at all top down, like we co-created every piece of the school. There were umpteen committees, like everybody was there on weekends, everybody was leaning in an incredible way. And the leaders, I was a grade 2 teacher when I went to the school, supported that kind of consultative, collaborative, co-created work.
Yeah.
And as a result, built things that had never been built before and created something that had never existed before. And I think for me, there were so many lessons that I took away from that experience and took then forward as I came back to Canada and moved into sort of defined, formalized leadership roles.
Yeah, and I think it's I think you're making it sound easy, but it's an incredibly difficult task to stand up something that doesn't exist like that. And it's like, sort of like building a startup. You're building a company like from scratch. You're thinking about all sorts of different perspectives from how do you want to communicate what the school's values are to the way that you deliver in the classroom, the benefit over there. So there's so many facets to it. I feel that it's just an incredible opportunity and experience to be able to just build something from scratch, right? And then see it come to life. I think that's a very special experience. And I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about your time as the executive director of the Canadian Accredited Independent Schools, and more from the perspective of, what were some of the key things that you noticed while you were spending more time learning about these independent schools all across Canada as well? Are there any key insights that you would share with the audience or what your experiences was like over there?
Absolutely. Again, I think that I was incredibly fortunate to be the executive director of CASE when I was the executive director of CASE, because I started 2 years before COVID and then was the executive director through COVID. And there are so many incredible lessons that came through that unexpected experience. Independent schools, I would say that the superpower of independent schools is that they are independent. So each school is founded for a different reason. Each has a unique mission, vision, values. And that is amazing to be able to create something that is focused, where students will have consistency and continuity from year to year, rather than, going from a progressive teacher to a traditional teacher to a, like that you have that capacity to create a single narrative that typifies the value proposition of your school. And so that's an amazing thing to be able to have. At the same time, each school functions incredibly autonomously, and in many contexts are actually working in competition with other independent schools. Right? There's sort of a finite group of people who consider independent schools as an option for their family. And we know that the same people who come and look at Montcrest go and look at 3 or 4 other schools before they ultimately make a choice.
Yeah.
So you have this gift of independence, and then you have the challenge of independence.
Yeah.
And and sort of being a competitor in a marketplace.
Yeah.
I think that what happened through COVID is that CASE as a network was able to really exemplify the opportunities for independent schools to become collaborators rather than competitors.
Yeah.
Because each school is different, I think it is fair for a school to say, oh, as I talk to you through the admissions process, I understand that this is what's, of deep value to your family, and I know the perfect school for you, and it's not us, right? And that we work together in a collaborative. So as you can imagine, as the world shifted into the COVID context, all schools, public schools, independent schools, private schools, were all looking to pivot. Remember the word?
Yeah.
To pivot and to be able to provide the best kinds of supports for the students that they were committed to. As independent schools, we were in a privileged position in that in most cases, we already had one-to-one computer programs, all of that technology existed. And so the shift happened, if not, in a week, in some cases in days, to being face-to-face, to being online. And so that was incredible for our students. And yet there were so many challenges, so many incredible challenges, that what CASE ended up doing was to create weekly opportunities for heads of school from across Canada to come together in a Zoom call for an hour every week.
Wow.
And as you know, the pandemic progressed regionally. So where Quebec was on March break first, so it hit hardest there first. So heads of school in Ontario could learn from the heads of school in Quebec about how they had managed the transition. And then the heads of school in BC could then contribute. And so those meetings in themselves created an opportunity to start conversation not just about COVID, but about so many other issues in education and in the independent school world specifically. And so where school leaders were at one point more separated just by virtue of the fact that they were independent, it gave the opportunity to really build a very robust network. Right. And under the leadership of the current executive director, really continues to thrive in a very connected and cohesive way.
Yeah, and I think that's very powerful. Like when I imagine it, the point that you said about being able to learn from one another, I think, whether you're looking at teachers learning from one another to schools learning from one another, I think it creates shared value for everybody. It's not that there's one person taking everything away or one party. It's shared value for everybody, and then you teach someone else something and they teach you something. So, and it's good to see that there's continuity to it, right? It's not just a COVID thing. COVID's done, we're done, let's go back to how it was. So it's nice to see that even though it was a tough time for a lot of people, I think it brought us together in a way.
Exactly.
It brought us together to get through this, because then it forced us to go through change, right? If someone told me that, okay, all schools are going to be virtual in a week, I would have told them they're crazy, right?
Right.
But then when we're forced to do it, we come together and then we sort of navigate that together. So it's really nice to see the continuity from there as well.
The rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah, I love that. The rising. Maybe that's the title of the podcast you've given to me. Yeah, there you go. And in terms of your experience, I think we hinted at this a little bit earlier on as well. But today, post pandemic, I feel like there's different challenges now that are facing our education system across all of Canada. What do you think are the biggest blockers that we have today, whether it's from independent schools, public schools, or education in general in Canada? What do you see as the biggest challenges that we need to navigate as a society today in education?
The thing that is top of mind for us at Montcrest is really about neurodiverse inclusion. I think that what we have seen in a societal way for a long time is that people sort of in the disabilities community have often faced obstacles that are of the creation of schools or of society. And I think that Montcrest is particularly well placed to begin to grapple with some of those ideas and talk about what does inclusion look like. Because the reality is, in every single school, you have sort of between 20 and 30% of the students who have a profile that is not neurotypical, that have different kinds of neurodiversity, and that it is our responsibility to ensure that we are meeting the needs of all of our learners all of the time. And so I think that this is a question that is really top of mind for us. I think has always been at Montcrest, but as we know, we in education we're never finished.
Yeah.
And so how do we continue to lean into this question and ensure that all learners are having their educational needs met, that we are supporting kids to know themselves as learners, and that the teachers know the students deeply as people and as learners, and that we are creating the environment in which we are meeting people where they are, and helping them to go to where they need to go next.
Yeah, no, I love that. And in the spirit of also sort of perhaps others learning from Montcrest as well, are there any strategies or tactical things that have been implemented to that effect to help resolve or sort of slowly work towards finding better solutions to that challenge?
I would say we don't have any clear solutions. We wish we had a silver bullet, and we don't, and I'm not sure that one exists. I think that what our incredible student success team has been really leaning into most recently is a redesign of our individual education plans. That team identified that those plans in the Montcrest context were very teacher-driven, and they felt that having student voice and family voice to inform each child's profile, their learner profile as well as their personal profile, and that bringing those perspectives into developing strategies that will support each learner has been we're sort of right at the beginning edge of that work. But I think that it's going to have a huge impact on how each student is known. At Montcrest, the thing that brought me to Montcrest is that the relationships here are really deep, and that teachers are deeply committed to knowing each student, and that has always existed here. I think that this work is going to take it to the next level.
Yeah.
Although the student success team's main focus is ensuring that the needs of neurodiverse learners are met within this school context, the work that they're doing is being expanded to all students, because it really is an example of universal design for learning, and that having that depth of knowledge of every learner is only in the best interest of the learners and the class and the teacher as well. So so it's some pretty great work that they're doing. I'm excited about how it's going to progress, through the rest of this year and into future.
That sounds really exciting. Maybe the next time we sit down, we'll get to see the other side of that, right?
Yeah.
So which will be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know, Patti's also what I define as quite literally a lifelong learner. Like, I think a lot of people do their bachelor's like myself. I haven't gone back for a master's yet. A lot of people do their master's like, that's it. But you've gone all the way.
Yes.
Right? You're doing your PhD or done your PhD.
I'm still in process.
Yeah, the process of doing your PhD. Tell us more about why that means so much to you. Why is it so important, that continuous learning, and how is that sort of, I believe that there may be components of that you infuse in the school as well. So what does that look like?
That is absolutely true. One of my foundational beliefs is that in order to be an educator, you have to be a learner. It's just an assumption. That I believe is true, and I love going to school. I love learning. I love being in contexts where learning is happening, and to deepen my understanding and to also deepen my capacity as a researcher, so that we can bring those practices into our school and make sure that as we are making decisions, we're making them in a way that is grounded in real research. And I also believe that teachers are researchers. I think that the work that they do when done well, it absolutely mirrors and parallels the work of research. Their job is to understand the learners in front of them and then to understand their curriculum and know how to bring those two things together in a way that is most effective and is going to be different every time they do it.
Yeah.
And so we deeply value professional learning in this context at Montcrest, and I would say in other independent schools where I have worked, and that professional learning is one of the pieces that differentiates an independent school and allows for the teachers to continue to lean in and learn and show what is possible in education.
Yeah, and it's really nice to see that sort of going through. And I do agree with you in the sense that every teacher, educator has to also be a learner to be a good educator. It's similar. I was talking to someone who was actually at the head of the Canadian Army, and he was doing a speech, and he said, to be a good leader, you have to first be a good follower.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to know what it means to be a good follower, and then you can learn to be a good leader. And it's similar in education. If you want to be a good educator, you have to be a good learner, right?
Absolutely.
And I think it goes down to the classroom level as well, right? We learn so much from students. It's incredible how much that you learn individually when you interact with the students. I think that's really nice to see it come together for the school as well.
Yeah. It is not an option. We don't consider it an option in this environment.
Yeah.
Professional learning is an expectation.
It's not an option, it's expectation. No, I love that. And I know the school also has focused a lot on using research data-driven insights to make changes or make improvements to things. Can you share an example of how you've leveraged maybe data or some research or some insights to make maybe minor or major changes in the school?
So I would say that most recently the work that we have been piloting is a new assessment tool called Map Growth, and that we're looking to use that data to help us, again, to better meet the needs of a range of learners, to personalize next steps for students. And so that data is data that we collect 2 or 3 times a year from students.
Okay.
And it allows us to see their growth over time. And if that growth trajectory is consistent with what one would expect for that child or a child in that grade, so that we can then be responsive and to be thinking both about that child's experience as well as our programming. And are there trends or patterns that we see in the data that will help us to better understand how we can be planning professional learning or tweaking our practices to better support students to hit benchmarks that are important for them as learners.
Yeah, and I'm curious to learn a bit more. One of the things that I think is a unique balance is we have one side where we have a lot of innovation coming in education, whether it's through AI or through new technologies. And then there's the other side of it, which is some parts of traditional education, some folks maybe they want to maintain, such as the interactions, the in-person interactions you have with teachers in the classroom. There's core things like that. How do you see those two aspects balancing out innovation with new technologies, but also, still being a school and still being an environment where students learn and teachers teach?
That's a great question. And something that we talk a lot about at Montcrest is the yes and.
Yeah.
Because we have students at our school who have specific learning profiles. Sort of a statement that we make sometimes is, because a child struggles to spell using the normal spelling conventions, it doesn't mean that they can't think about big ideas and be a deep contributor to the learning environment. And so, that to us is an example of yes and, because what it means is that you need to have a very rich, engaging learning environment for that child, and you need to be able to provide explicit instruction to ensure that they're getting the skills that they need to be successful in later life.
Yeah.
We can extend that yes and to this question. We live in an age of digital technology.
Yeah.
We know that it is important for students to have experience with and to have skills related to technology.
Right.
We can't pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
We need we can't just shut it off.
Is that adapt?
Exactly. We need to lean into those technologies and teach children how to use them well. And we know that those technologies are creating a context where the human skills are even more important.
Yeah.
So skills that you might consider as traditional or skills that you might consider as innovative in education. You know, really looking at what they would call soft skills or non-cognitive skills. There's so many different
I love
terms. Human skills.
Oh, I like
exactly.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that capacity to collaborate, that capacity to have compassion, the capacity to be curious, the capacity, right? All of those capacities need to live in classrooms and need to be elevated in the experiences that students have in classrooms to balance the other realities that exist as related to digital technology, etc.
Yeah, and I was talking to a kid, and he was in grade 10, and he comes to me and he says, you know, our math teacher teaches us all this algebra, all this trigonometry, and he says, tell me honestly, Dheeraj, have you ever used it in your career? And I said, look, I've never used trigonometry, right? But I tried to explain to him, I think a lot of students maybe miss this, but what you learn in math isn't always drawing a triangle and finding the area of a triangle. You're learning the process of solving problems, right? I work in an industry where I have to solve problems every day, right? But it's because of from an early childhood, I was always put in situations to solve problems, whether it's your assignment, whether it's your in classroom. Think of it from the perspective of you're growing in these skills. You may not use that specific thing when you grow up, but the skills that you develop in any classroom are very foundational to your own success. So I think it's also cool for the kids to see that, and they're like, oh, okay, I see it now, or okay, that makes a lot more sense. So I definitely agree with you.
And when you sort of juxtapose the idea of traditional education or more progressive education, I think that, you know, one of the things that we talk about is ensuring that students are actually doing the hard work of learning.
Right.
That we haven't created an educational context where the teacher is solving all of the problems for the students. That in fact, students are being given that opportunity to do the hard work of learning.
Yeah.
Because learning is hard. It's very hard. Yeah. And you know, earlier you were talking about challenge and schools should be challenging.
Right, yeah.
You know,
they shouldn't, of course, yeah.
Schools should be challenging. It should be hard. And I think that in an engaging environment, or an engaging educational context, that you can then equate something that is hard with something that is enjoyable.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you don't have to be happy all the time at school.
Yeah.
But if you find joy in solving problems or figuring out puzzles or doing hard things, then that's the best kind of
I mean, preparing them for the future.
Absolutely.
Right? That's what the world's all about.
Exactly.
That's absolutely cool. Yeah. And you know, sort of before we go into the rapid fire, there's one question that I've been really thinking about, which is one of the things I was reading about the school was this idea of belonging. I know you said a little bit about how the relationships are very strong at the school, whether you look at the parents, the teachers, the students. Can you share what you think the secret sauce is behind that? Because I think that, you know, a lot of people I talk to say they have a lot of strong relationships and a lot of strength in their relationships, but I think everybody does it a little bit differently or has a different approach to the way that they think about the connected leadership. So what do you think is Montcrest's, I don't want you to say the secret sauce, but what do you think, what comes to mind when you think about belonging and those relationships?
And it's interesting that you say that, because when I first came to Montcrest, it was when I was the executive director of CASE, and I toured the school with David Thompson, who was the head of school then.
Right.
And it was some, like, you felt it when you walked in the door. And it was incredible to move through the school and just to see the way that teachers and children interacted with each other. and you could feel the love, you could feel the love. And so that's what originally brought me here. And when I first came, I sat down individually with every faculty and staff member.
Oh, wow.
And met one-on-one, and I asked them, why they came to Montcrest, what brought them here, and why they stay. There are incredible number of long standing faculty at the school. And every single person, when I asked that question, said it's the people.
Yeah.
It's the people. The people keep me here. And so I think that this goes back to belonging. And so we're sort of digging more deeply into this. It's, belonging is an integral part of our principles at the school. We do talk a lot about belonging. And most recently, we've developed a belonging survey that we do with our grade 5, 6, 7, and 8 students to try to better understand what is the experience of belonging that students are having here. So we've only done the survey once and have some sort of beginning wonderings. But look forward to replicating that data and digging more deeply into it. And, being able to actually say, what is the secret sauce?
Yeah.
What are people?
And sometimes it is just that feeling, and it comes from the people build the culture.
Yeah.
And it's something that you can't put on paper.
That's right.
Like a lot of people say, sometimes when you walk into Apple headquarters, you feel different. You feel like something's happening, right? And those sort of feelings that you're talking about, it's built by a very long tenure of culture that just embodies the school in this case every time, right? So I would also understand if there was no answer, right? And it exists.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say it, right? But I think the belonging survey is very interesting. I've never heard that before, so it's very cool to see, and maybe it's something other schools can think about as well, as they maybe want to improve, or they maybe want to grow in that perspective as well. Okay, well, I'm going to move into a rapid fire round. It's my favorite one because I get to ask you all the questions really quickly.
Okay.
And I'll ask you a question, take a minute or two to answer, and then we'll keep going along. Okay, right? So first question is, what's a book that has had a significant impact on your philosophy, whether it's with education or leadership?
Education and Experience by John Dewey.
Okay, I've not read that one. You said. Okay, on my to-do list. All right. What's one part of your daily routine that you cannot skip?
I would say the clubs that I have with kids. I facilitate, or I work with students on 4 different clubs. I have 4 clubs that I run every week. And that is the highlight of my day, every day.
Can I ask you to pick one? Your favorite one? Or is that?
Oh, no, I can't possibly.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what they all are. So I have a challenge reading, a challenge book club with grade 4 students. I have what started as an amigurumi club, which is making the little animals out of crochet. Small animals. Which we are this year calling Fiber Arts Club. And I facilitate skateboarding club.
Wow.
Yep. So we have a
skateboarding club. Okay.
Skateboarding club. And then finally, I'm working with a group of very, very passionate grade 7 students on the food committee. And so they have identified many opportunities at the school that relate to food, nutrition, hot lunch, the kinds of things that we have in our tuck shop, growing food, harvesting food, preparing food, food education, food composting. Like the list goes on and on and on of things that they want to take leadership in as a school. And so we meet weekly, and we've just created 2 subcommittees who will start actioning some of them.
Wow, a lot of diversity in your involvement as well, which is cool. Yeah. Okay, next question. What is your favorite thing to do outside of work?
I think I would say since COVID, my favorite thing outside of work is gardening.
Gardening. Okay. When did you get into that?
During the pandemic.
A lot of people did. I feel like a lot of people I spoke to said, I started doing gardening during COVID.
That's right. That's right. Because we were, isolated. And
is that why I see all these little beautiful plants in your office? Is that like your sort of endeavor?
This is a piece of it. This is, I just have this incredible light in this window too. So it's just allowed these to grow. But
Well, no, I love that. Okay. If it was not for being in education, what industry do you think you'd pursue?
I say to students all the time that I'm not sure what I'm going to be when I grow up. And so, there are many things that I have thought over time that I would love to do. When I was doing my master's, I was reading a lot about Seymour Papert and Mitch Resnick, and I always wanted to go and work with Mitch Resnick at MIT in the design lab there.
Sounds like education to me, Patti.
That's maybe education. But I also, what are all the things, I'd love to make pickles. Oh, what I mean? I'd love to...
For the gardening business, maybe?
Maybe.
Yeah.
A bouquet business. I would love to grow flowers and sell bouquets.
Wow.
I would love to do.
Make people's day special.
Yeah.
Another way.
Yeah. I don't know. There are umpteen things. I'd like to be the mayor of a small town.
Oh, wow.
I'd like to, there's just...
Well, whatever you do, I think you'll be incredibly successful. You sound like, I could see you as a mayor.
Yes.
I could see you as owning a little bouquet shop, cute little bouquet shop in the corner of a street. So I can see that. That's really cool to see. What is your favorite spot on the Montcrest campus?
I would say that my favorite spot is probably the community garden.
Okay.
So being an urban school, we are incredibly fortunate that we have some sort of beautiful unspoiled spaces, and we have a space that is called the community garden. It's almost a half acre of lightly forested property where kids can play in an old-fashioned way, where we've got just sort of basic materials of planks and spools and sticks, and
get out there,
and they go and they build beautiful things and engage in that way. I would probably say that equally this space is one of my favorite spaces because it, over the last 2 years, has really become a hub in so many ways. This is the place where I do clubs. The kids come here.
Yeah,
they take over. I had 18 children. Can you imagine 18 children in here crocheting?
Yeah.
Last week, and so it's a lovely space to be in.
Yeah.
When new kids start at the school, they're like, there's the principal. You have to go to the principal.
Yeah. Oh, I'm in trouble.
Did the bad children come? And I'm like, oh no. There's no.
Everybody's here. Yeah.
There's no room for bad children in my office. They must talk to their teacher if they're having trouble with their managing behavior. They don't come to me. We're much too busy thinking about big ideas and crocheting.
Come on, bring the real stuff in here.
Exactly. That's who comes to my office.
I love that. I'm going to throw in one more question. Yeah. In this office, can you share a story about something? Because I see so much. I feel like there's so many stories to everything. Can you share a story about something in this office?
There are stories about all of the things in this office. Yeah, well, I'll share a story about City Skills. I was thinking about the bougie rack, but I think I'll leave the bougie rack.
Well, you could do both, yeah.
So City Skills, last year, a group of grade 7s, and I went to a competition called Future Prize Challenge, created by Future Design School, and it's hosted each year at Upper Canada College. And essentially, the students are challenged to think about a problem in their community and to do an empathy exercise before going to the competition. So they have to, it's all about design thinking.
Yeah.
They take the process to the point of empathy, and then they, on site through the day, they go through a number of activities to try and solve the problem. So the problem that this group of students came up with was helicopter parents. And they said that particularly since the pandemic, they feel that parents are overprotective and don't give students enough credibility for their capacity to be independent, to have agency. And so they talked to students in grades 6, grade 7, grade 8, and they learned that students, for example, weren't allowed to walk alone to a program or take the TTC or figure out how to spend their birthday money. That parents were micromanaging them in this way. And so as we walked to get on to the TTC to go to this event, one of the students in this group said, I'm really not sure how we're going to solve this problem because we can't change the way parents parent. And I said, that's absolutely true. I don't know what we're going to come up with.
Yeah.
And so through the course of the day, the solution that they created was to create what they call a city skills program.
Okay.
And so the idea was that in raising the capacity of students through structured programming to gain skills that would allow them to be independent, it would build parents' confidence in their children because they would see the outcomes of these experiences that they're doing. Yeah. And so this is essentially the format that they created in that competition and then brought back to the school and pitched to the board of directors and pitched to the leadership team. And so they felt that during the school day, we could be supporting students to gain skills in active transportation, taking the TTC, riding a bicycle, being able to fix their own bicycle, etc. They felt that, skills around digital literacy were really important and being able to stay safe as they use the internet, social media, etc. And then we could have other programming that would happen after school that would help kids to learn to stay home alone, babysitting, cooking, first aid, a number of things. And then also financial literacy that could live in both places, both within the mathematics program, but also then, doing an after-school program that would help to elevate financial literacy. So the kids made this program. And as I said, they pitched it. And now we are incrementally building this program that the children designed.
I love that.
Yeah.
Inception to reality.
Yeah, right.
That's incredible. I don't even think some people would have thought about that, sort of indirectly showing your parents in school.
Exactly.
School,
they thought if we had a sort of a badging system, then they would be also able to take their accomplishments. So when they apply for their first babysitting job, or they, apply to future schools or all of those kinds of things to really elevate and highlight the kinds of skills that they gained through this program.
Yeah, I love that. That's incredible. That was my favorite question. Okay, we're going to move on to the last question, which what we call the final question. I'm going to bring out my final question notebook. So what happens here is one of our previous guests has left a question. Yes. So I'm going to get you a question, not from myself. I haven't read this before. Yeah. So from our previous guest, and then you're going to have a question that you'd want to ask the next. Okay. All right, so let's see what we've got. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So this question is from G1, who is the Director of Education at Waterloo District School Board. G1's square. Oh, there you go. G1's question is, what brings you joy and how does that nurture and support your leadership?
So many things bring me joy. Students bring me joy, and the ideas and the discourse and the growth and achievement of students brings me joy. Being able to talk to them about ideas and perspectives, and as in the project I just shared,
that's joy.
That's joy.
Yeah.
Last year, actually over the last 2 years, we had a group of students who brought forward a concern about our school uniform. Okay. And that the school uniform wasn't sustainable, and that as a school we had a responsibility to be aware of our carbon footprint and the impact that we were having. And so this group of students over the course of 18 months essentially found a new source of uniforms for our school, interviewed different providers, just chose a provider that was most closely aligned with the values of environmental sustainability, and then created an opportunity for students to consider what we wear when and what those pieces look like. So in grades 6, 7, and 8, our students took our existing branding and applied it to the new uniform pieces in the way that they felt was most appropriate. And then in each class, they voted. And so we had a panel of clothing experts.
Okay.
And then the top designs in each class were pitched to this panel. And those are the designs that exist on our uniform today.
That's such a nice story.
Right. And so these are the experiences that bring me joy.
Yeah.
Is knowing that every single child at our school is competent, is powerful, and can contribute to our community in real, authentic, and meaningful ways. And to be able to work with students through these kinds of projects and processes is pretty amazing.
And I think if there's anything that it shows is your point of co-creation, right? This isn't a place where it's top down. This is a place where we all create, we all inspire, and we all, bring things to life. So I absolutely love that. And I think that's a perfect note to end off on. So Patti, thank you so much for being here with us today. We appreciate your time. This was wonderful. Such a great experience. I feel like our listeners are going to have such a joy listening to this, such a good time, so many insights, so many stories. So we're going to have you leave the question for the next one. So whoever's the next guest, good luck to you. But we look forward to seeing you in the next one.
Thank you very much. It was really nice to be able to chat.